Welcome to Screw the Stock Market. On this show, we discuss a variety of alternative asset classes, tools to help you unleash your money, a success mindset, and inspiration to see what's possible when we do things differently.
Hey everyone, welcome to Screw the Stock Market. Today we had a really awesome episode, really unique angle on something I had never heard of. What'd you think of the show today, Aziz?
Oh, it was cool. It was definitely cool. Like you said, never thought about this. This is like completely new option. And just to kind of not beat around the bush, the whole idea that our current guest, Josh, blanked out on Josh's last name, Lawlor. Thank you. Like Jerry Lawlor, the wrestler.
Oh yeah.
For those of you who are old heads and remember. But yeah, so brilliant idea. He kind of walks us through his life experiences as an investor, getting into real estate, struggling with the individual kind of residential real estate, like buying, single family houses and renting them out kind of thing. And through a series of events, he fell into this niche that is just absolutely, I would never have thought about it. But it's essentially renting out your house for movie and commercial shoots, which is, I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting for a bunch of reasons. He talks about ways that he does it so that all the income from it is tax-free. He talks about ways to do it so that he's making over $100,000 a year from it in a very passive way that doesn't really disrupt his life. So we're talking about a passive investment that is tax-free, that makes you an additional $100,000. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Now keep in mind there's rules around the tax-free component that he gets into, and you'll find out more when you actually listen to the episode. But again, all the income tax-free and the rates are phenomenal because you charge by the hour. But I think
Yes.
we're giving too much away right now. We're going to let you all just get into it. Check out the episode. Lots of great details, lots of great stuff. He tells you how to do it, where to list it, the whole shebang, the things to look out for, and the pitfalls and the benefits of this whole process. So it's a great episode. I think you love it. I love it. I'm about to try it out. I'm about to get all my friends to try it out. It's going to be great.
Enjoy the show.
Hi. Before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you guys for being such avid listeners, and also to give you an opportunity to participate in various investment opportunities with Alex and I. Some of the same deals that we talk about will be offered to you so you can put to action what you've learned. Just go to screwthestockmarket.com and hit the Invest With Us button at the top of the page.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Screw the Stock Market. This is the show where we talk about investing outside of the stock market with the goal of taking control of our finances, our futures, and our lives. And so today we have a very special guest. Josh Lawlor is with us. He's going to be sharing with us about a very unique angle on real estate investing that I think we've definitely never had on the show. So I'm really excited. We always love our variety of asset classes and strategies. And so I think this is really something I'd never really heard about. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Josh. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. And look, I think what you've just said really resonates with a lot of people, right? Not many people have heard of film shoots, and it is little known, and that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to promote it, because I think it's a really great opportunity for anyone who's not only just interested in real estate, but generally. But I haven't always done film shoots. I think like a lot of people, I started out in real estate in maybe more traditional ways. So maybe it's worth just backing up a little bit before we get in, and kind of I can talk through what led me to where I am today, if that sounds good.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love that. We always want to get to know
Yeah,
you,
please.
and kind of that story is super important
Yeah.
for us and for our listeners. Please.
Yeah. So, look, I've worked in, had kind of the corporate America job for many years, but was always like a lot of people, right? Kind of looking for opportunities, more passive opportunities, right? Kind of a different type of lifestyle, a little more freedom. Um, I guess, my wife and I kind of first started in real estate with what I would call a long-term live-in flip. So this is kind of going way back to the financial crisis of 2008. And right after that, so the next year, housing markets were down. And so we actually purchased a house. We kind of bought our first house, starting a family. And this was one of those classic, ugliest house on the block. The kitchen was a time capsule to 1984, super dated, right? Strange configuration, but anyway, it was within our budget, and we saw some opportunity that over time we could improve it. And so with that property, we ended up ultimately doing a gut renovation, addition, kind of brought it up to the current century, and brought up the electrical, everything, and made it livable. We created some equity throughout that process, and that was really that equity was really what gave us the down payment to start investing what I would call more traditional real estate, right? So, got a home equity line of credit on the new equity that we had created, and we started to invest in single family, just very traditional long-term single family rentals, long distance though. Now I'm based in the Northeast, and, kind of looking around the country at the time, this is probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we determined that our market wasn't the greatest for this. And so we looked at the Southeast. So we targeted Atlanta and Jacksonville. And we actually worked with it was a startup at the time, this company called Roofstock, which is kind of a turnkey real estate operator. And, I think like a lot of people, we were a little bit scared to get in. Oh, it's a lot of money. What happens if we make a mistake? We don't want to lose money. But through Roofstock, it sort of gave us a little bit of confidence because we saw all of the market research, all of the due diligence on these properties. And I like the idea of investing in a property where there was already a tenant in place. So it kind of, cash flow from day one. Now, more experienced real estate investors will say, turnkey, you're not really going to make a lot of money on that because, you're not going to add a lot of value. But for someone like us just starting out, it works. So we picked up a few properties in Atlanta and Jacksonville, and they cash flowed. Initially, I was very sort of doing the math, focused on the cash flow, but I quickly realized that if it was going to move the needle, I'd have to acquire many more single family homes than I had the budget for. Right? Like I think a lot of people run into that and realize that. The good news is over time, the properties appreciated. So while the cash flow was minimal, right, a couple $100 a month on each of these properties, over the past number of years, they've really appreciated. We've had some market tailwinds, which have certainly helped. Taken advantage of that by refining out a couple times actually, while interest rates were still low. And again, by leveraging that cash out refi, we figured, okay, well, we've done a renovation and a rebuild locally once, let's do it again. And maybe naively so, because our first experience was actually fairly smooth. And so in 2018, we found another local kind of fixer-upper house in our area. And we went into the project with the idea that, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to renovate, make an addition, create equity. The issue with this property was that the setbacks was a little bit close to the street. And every architect we talked to said, as long as you don't make it worse, you'll be fine. So just carry that line. Of course, as soon as we present the plans to the planning board, where this is going. They said,
That's their
nope,
famous last words.
Yep,
You'll be
absolutely
fine.
not. You can't do this. And so we had a tough decision to make. Do we just renovate the existing structure, which was not really the business plan? It would have been kind of a bit small for what we wanted to do, or we do a tear down rebuild. It was kind of a tough decision, but we kind of said, what? If we're really going to do this right, we've got to bite the bullet, and we're going to do a tear down rebuild. So that triggered all kinds of new requirements and approvals and, all kinds of things and time, obviously, and money. And so we, since it was a tear down rebuild, we couldn't live in the house while we were doing it. So we had to find we had to find a rental, which was tough in my area because there just wasn't a lot of rental stock for what we needed. A lot of owners wanted a 2 or more year lease. And we optimistically thought we don't need 2 years because this project is going to be done in 8 months, right? And so we moved out, and work is going, and then this is where the story takes a twist. So we got a letter in the mail from our school, and our school administration, and this was a rather threatening letter, and it said it's come to our attention that your children are no longer residing within the boundaries of the school district. Please schedule a meeting immediately to discuss this matter. So he said, okay, well, this is a misunderstanding. We're just temporarily, we had to find a rental that was literally just, a block over the line of the school district boundary. And so we went in for a meeting thinking that we would just smooth this over, but they were not having it and kept a very hard line. We were essentially told, you've got 2 weeks, and you can either, and again, this is a public school, you can either pay tuition, quote unquote, pay tuition, and your daughters can stay in the school district, or they're going to have to leave they're going to have to just, go to a different school until you're physically residing back into the house within the district where you're simply improving the neighborhood. All right. So pretty crazy story. So I view it as we were essentially, extorted by the school system to either pay up to allow our kids to stay in the school where their friends were, or, don't pay, and they would have to switch schools where they didn't have any friends for 6 months or however much longer the construction was going to take before they would be allowed to return to the school. So my wife and I kind of talked it over, and, we both had experiences growing up where we moved. It was difficult, not easy to do that as a kid. So he said, you know what, we'll bite the bullet. We'll pay this money so our, kids' lives aren't disrupted. But that got us thinking about, okay, well, we've paid literally tens of thousands of dollars here over the time in tuition. How are we going to get that back? Because the monthly cash flow from my single family homes is not really going to move the needle in that sense. And so that in part is what got us thinking about trying, renting our home for film shoots. So when we moved back into the new house, it came up in conversation kind of casually. Someone mentioned to us, oh, you might want to consider, I heard some people can rent their homes for shoots. You can make a lot of money. And that's kind of the arc of that storyline in terms of, my real estate journey from single family homes and, some small multifamily apartments to getting to film shoots, which is really kind of the aspect of real estate in my portfolio that I'm most excited about today.
You're pretty much a studio at this point. It's like a studio set.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of where I got to, and I'm happy to. I think it's probably worth talking about. What I mean when I say film shoots, right? Because I think that there are a lot of common misconceptions out there, and when I talk to people about this, people always have they bring up the same myths, right? And I can kind of run through them, right? And so I think the first thing is when we're talking about film shoots, people, what do you think of? You think of feature films, big productions, blockbuster movies, explosions, right? All kinds of things. When we're renting our home for shoots, we're really talking about primarily 1-day commercial shoots. So, the guests that we have, the clients, if you think about it, every business, whether it's from a small business to a large, well-known established business, everyone has a website. Everyone has social media marketing that they're doing. Everyone needs content, and they need professional content to promote or sell whatever they're selling. So the types of shoots we get are typically for a company that is, maybe they have a new seasonal product line and they need to do a shoot to capture that content for their website, for their social media. Maybe it's a startup that's launching a new site and needs to capture content just to get going. We've had musicians, right, who want to do a music video. That's kind of another niche that we've done. So, when you think film shoots, I think the first misconception there is that we're not talking about long-term movies. We're typically talking about, one day shoots, maybe 1 or 2 day shoots, for and the method I teach and tell people is to get professional crews, right? And we can get into that later. We can talk about that. So, I think that's one. That's kind of the main myth. I think another one is the very next thing that people usually bring up is, well, I live in a normal house, so my home isn't right for film shoots, right? And so that's kind of the next sort of the misconception I think that is important to talk through. So, look,
Yeah, because that was going to be my main question. Because
yeah,
what are the criteria of what type of house that they looking for?
yeah, no,
I mean,
great question. And so the answer is there is really no right house for film shoots, right? So, um, if you think about it, every production is different, right? Every production has different requirements. So, are there productions that need that, huge oceanfront estate? Sure, they're out there, right? It's, catering or trying to promote to a specific niche, but for the most part, every production has different requirements. And look, I can share a couple examples I think that really illustrate this. So, early on in our film shoot rental journey, we fielded an inquiry from a company that they have a platform that connects parents with caretakers, so babysitters, nannies, that kind of thing, and they did a scouting visit, which is where they come. The director or producer comes with a couple members of the crew, take a walk around, look at the lighting, maybe plan out some scenes, ask some questions. And they said, okay, we'll give you a call in a few days. We're looking at a few other places. Got a call a few days later. He said, Josh, we loved your house, but, we're catering to parents with young children. We would need a house that kind of looks a little more chaotic, a little more cluttered, a little more wear and tear, a house that looks like it's got, rambunctious kids in it. And, at the time my girls were a little bit older. So, basically they wanted something with, more clutter, a little bit older. So, look, I think that's a perfect example of, you don't need a new house. You don't need a pristine house. There are all kinds of houses that shoots look for. I think, another time is another good example. Unfortunately, we had a plumbing disaster a couple years ago. So we woke up, came downstairs, and what had happened is a water filter under the kitchen sink had exploded overnight, and the entire first
Oh,
floor of our house flooded. Of our relatively new house, flooded.
oh, that's a nightmare.
We had to demo the entire first floor. So wood floors, cabinets, countertops, like everything. It looked like we were sort of back to a construction zone. And of course, during this time, I'm fielding shoot inquiries, and I'm having to kind of explain and say, look, I'm really sorry, but we're undergoing renovation, should be back up and running in 3 to 4 months. Let's talk then. But one of the inquiries said, oh, that's okay. And actually, well, can we shoot in the area that was destroyed? And it turns out that this was a company, this was a startup that sold utility monitoring devices. So these are the kind of things like they attach to your electrical, your gas line, and your water line, and they
Oh, that's
alert you
perfect.
if there are any problems. And so they were super excited, and they were like, oh yeah, this is great. And so we did a shoot with them. They came, they filmed in our basement, where everything connected. They shot the destroyed section of our main floor. And so, you never really know what the requirement of a production is. So there's no sense in trying to, position your house or for a shoot, because all shoots are different. And look, I'll even add that it's not even always the inside of your house that, productions are after. So we've had inquiries from a roofing company that just wanted to shoot like pictures of our roof. We've had a well-known vodka company that wanted to do a tailgating party scene in our driveway outside. So, it can be, yeah, all types of houses, and not just single-family homes, but apartments work for film shoots.
very
So,
interesting.
yeah,
So, well, first, actually, we didn't really get to reflect too much on your story.
yeah,
Before I get into this, I wanted
yeah,
to just say thank you for that background. It seems like
yeah,
I imagine that our audience is going to really connect with you because you have done a lot of the things they've either done or wanted to do, in the fact
Mm,
that you've done the long-term live-in flip, you've done the turnkey, and I think, you know, some of them that might have actually done it might have experienced some of that same frustration, right? Like I'll say, like some of my first steps
yeah.
in investing, I said, okay, well, this is not gonna ever get me to that retirement. And so I think that's something I really want to
Yeah.
just make sure to point out as a point of connection where
Right.
resonates
Right.
with me, and it there is some scale, right,
Yeah.
that needs to happen. Um,
Yeah.
and then now, kind of coming back to this new opportunity that you identified, which is really, again, it's different, it's really unique, and you mentioned some of the common questions. One of the other ones that occurs to me, and I'm sure you've had it before,
Yeah.
is I would think that this only happens in LA, New York, Atlanta, but I'm in
Yep.
Midwest somewhere, away from those.
Yeah, no, great question, and thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, that's another common myth that people think. They think, oh, I have to be near LA, I have to be near Hollywood. The reality is, right, if we come back to this concept that businesses across the country need content for their websites, for their social media, for their to promote their product, and these companies are everywhere. Okay, and so it's not just the like I said, it's not just the big names, but smaller regional companies as well. And what I found is the site, the location selection of where a shoot is going to happen is often less based on, the need for a super specific type of house, and more about, the convenience factor as well. And you can look at it from two angles. So one angle is, where is the client based? So let's say the company or the owner of the company that's paying for this shoot, where are they based? That's kind of one perspective. And the other perspective is, where is the crew based that will be shooting it? And so we've had situations from kind of both sides. So we had a shoot where we were working with it was an online HR talent sourcing agency, and they were based in the Pacific Northwest. And again, I'm in the Northeast. And this company happened to be working with a production company that was based in the New York area, and I'm located near the New York area. And so this client flew to us from the Pacific Northwest because the crew that they were working with was based near me, and the crew found my house and my location. We've had other instances where it's the reverse, where we've had the client who was based near us or within an hour or so of us, and the crew actually flew in that they were working with from another location. So it really depends on, where is the crew, where is the client, and I would say it's more common for the crew to fly out, but there are, you know photographers and videographers and producers and directors everywhere. All right. I mean, we think of Hollywood, we think of big cities, but it's really everywhere. So geographically, and actually, it's not even just in the U.S. Right. I mean, this happens internationally as well. I don't know if you guys have, international listeners, but if you look at the major platforms that I recommend, you can search. Its properties are searchable not just in the U.S. but in foreign countries as well, and all across the U.S. And because I've looked to see, and even in the smallest cities, rural areas, you'll find locations available for
Very
shoots.
cool.
Okay, now I have so many questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first thing is, logistically, what do you need? Are there any types of special insurances, special criteria? What's
Yeah.
what's the kind of regulatory kind of constraints around this process?
Yeah, no, great question. So there are a few things that you want to be aware of, and I talk about this a bit in my course as well. So, one, I would say, depending on the platform that you use, there are protections built in. So kind of like if you're a short-term rental investor, you might be familiar that the platforms that you use have some built-in protection, right? Some built-in insurance, and there are similar protections built in when you go through the recommended listing platforms. And that's something that maybe we can get into in terms of, why you want to go through the listing platforms. And I'll actually just share, it may be worth or informative to kind of share a story where, I kind of learned a lesson the hard way. So early in our film shoot rental journey, we got an inquiry for a relatively small shoot, only about 8 people. It was for I think it was for like this organic pet food startup, right? And so it should have been very, very straightforward, very easy. And in my municipality, in my town, there is a film shoot permitting process. So that's something else to kind of, you were asking about sort of regulatory concerns. Um, not every municipality has a film shoot policy and permit application, but I would say chances are most do, unless you're in a more rural area and where it's a little bit more laissez-faire and you might not have it. But if you're near any kind of, city or even suburban area, chances are you've got a permit process. And look, production crews are used to this, so this shouldn't be a deterrent. I would recommend that everyone always, follow whatever local permitting regulations there are. I kind of spent some time in the course talking about how you figure out, what the permitting regulations are and how you deal with your town. But anyway, so in this particular instance, we went through the usual process. We told these guys to, they had to get the permit. Oh, and one thing I left out too. So these guys found us on one of the recommended listing platforms, but they really were trying to, there's a small fee that the recommended listing platforms have, like an Airbnb takes a fee. And these guys didn't want to pay the fee. They said, hey, can we just, make a direct agreement? And, we said, it was kind of early on, and we said, okay, well, it's a pretty small shoot. So, fine, we'll go direct, but you still have to get a permit from the town. And so these guys submitted their application, but for whatever reason, and to this day, it's the first and last time their permit was rejected. So, and I maintain. Sorry, go ahead.
So you don't get the permit. The other party is responsible for getting the
That's
permit.
right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, your production crew that you're working with, your producer, they'll be the ones obtaining the permit, and that's common. And kind of, again, red flag if you get an inquiry, if anyone's trying this and someone that they're working with says, "Oh no, can we just do this without a permit?" I would say that's a red flag, and I would recommend not working with that crew.
Now,
But anyway,
is
go ahead.
there a repercussion on you if you do say yes without a permit,
So
or
I
is it
think,
on them solely?
well, I think it can impact you as well, right? Because it's your house, and if there's a problem, look, towns have a permitting process for a couple of reasons. One, yeah, they're making a little money on the permitting fees, but it's also to ensure that this is going to be a safe shoot. It's not going to be dangerous. It's not going to overly disrupt the neighborhood, right? So, there might be questions like, are there going to be explosions, right, that you're doing? And, we've never had a shoot with explosions, but, they're kind of thinking feature films, right? So yeah, I mean, if you were to do a shoot without a permit and there were a problem, your town could probably take action against you as the homeowner for doing a shoot without a permit. So again, don't recommend that.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so these guys were rejected, and I maintain that the only reason they were rejected is because I don't know how else to say this, but these guys were just jerks, like the way that they interacted with people. And if you think about a municipality office that's approving film permits, they don't have to approve it. And so if you're just not being a kind of a cordial, polite person, they might reject it. So these guys were rejected, surprisingly, because again, it was a very small, limited shoot. But they then came after us because they were rejected, and they basically sent their legal department after us for lost revenue because they had sunk costs in terms of like having to find a new location now and their planning. And look, we negotiated them down to somewhere between $500 and $1,000 that we ended up having to pay them. But that was we learned our lesson very quickly. And, I would, if we had gone through a listing platform, we wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. And the listing platform would have protected us from that because of a rejected permit application.
So what grounds did they have to come against you? I mean, if they are the ones who did not file the permit and
Yeah,
then were the city or local municipal government refused them,
yeah, yeah.
you didn't have anything to do with any of that.
Well, we had a direct contract agreement with them that they had drafted up, and look, we were naive, we were new to the they were new to the we were new to the process, and there was no out clause for us in this contract that we agreed to. Again, it was the only time that the first and last time we learned our lesson. And so yeah, so that's kind of one of the things in terms of regulatory. I think you want to go through the listing platforms. You'll be protected. You want to, if you have a permitting process within your town, you definitely want to go through that process as well.
So they were insisting that you still execute the contract even though they didn't have a permit. That's why they
That's right.
said that you're
Because
a
they,
breach of contract.
that's right.
Got it.
They couldn't do the shoot. They sort of, I mean, they didn't take us to court, but it was like, we will, you need to pay us for this lost revenue and sunk costs that we've put into this shoot that now we can't do. So.
Oh, and
Mm.
I just want to highlight for everyone, looking at Aziz's response to that, you could tell he's the one who has legal training from the group. He starts thinking about arguments and
Fly-by-night attorney.
objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I want to kind of separate this into two things. I don't know if this makes sense, but
Yeah.
I want to look at it as a business first, and then we could talk maybe about some of the practical ways to get into it. And then the other part of it
Sure.
would be as an investment, where you can talk maybe a little bit about, I don't know if that makes sense, but because I mean,
Yeah.
there might be some
Yeah.
investment that needs to go into this. There might be, the way that we normally look at an investment, things like returns, cash on cash, IRRs. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense in this context.
Yeah, no, it's a good, we can certainly, let's touch on that. And, in terms of thinking about this as a business, and it's probably worth talking about the money aspect and the investment aspect. So I think, we haven't really touched on the benefits yet of film shoot rentals. And this is where I think it's probably worth sort of touching on a few key benefits that make it distinct from other types of real estate investment that I've been involved with, right? If I think of my experience, and maybe you guys are your listeners who invest in real estate. So the first thing, you typically need to come up with a down payment. You're investing in a property. There's going to be, yes, there are creative financing, but the typical sort of vanilla, you need to save for a down payment. With film shoot rentals, you're already living in your asset, right? So you don't need to save up. When I got into real estate, we had to do a flip. We built equity. We used a HELOC. We saved up. Film shoot rentals, you're already in your asset. So you kind of take the time period of saving off the table. And it, in my view, also reduces the risk, right? Particularly, I remember when I was first getting into real estate, I was really nervous. A down payment, it was a lot of money. Like, again, what happens if I made a bad investment? What happens if I lose my down payment, right? So that's one big benefit. You don't have to deal with any underwriting, right? Anyone who's gone through the underwriting process with a lender, particularly for single families versus a little bit easier with multifamily, but you know that it takes a long time. You're asked for, there's so much paperwork. And so just the length of time and hassle to get started is super long. But with film shoot rentals, again, you're already living your asset. So that's totally off the table. You don't need to.
One
You don't
question
need to worry
related
about
to
that.
that. Are you able
Yeah.
to do this as a renter, as a tenant?
Yeah. Great question. So, again, and my recommendation is, so long as you clear this with your landlord, you can do this, right? A lot of people may be thinking like, oh, I can just do this on the side. I think the parallel here is short-term Airbnb rentals, right? Like we all know it's kind of a popular niche to do short-term rental arbitrage, right? Where people don't own the asset. They rent an apartment and they get approval from the landlord to then turn around and rent it out as a short-term rental. Same thing with film shoots, right? I think, again, I'm always going to recommend that people are being above board. You want to check to make sure that your landlord is okay with this if you're a renter, but definitely doable. So, so I think, we talked about there's no down payment. You can get started right away. And then the really interesting thing about film shoots too is the economics of it is kind of interesting, right? Because if we start at one end of the spectrum with real estate, we think about a long-term a long-term 12-month lease on a building. So, your whatever that's going to be, you can get a certain amount. Maybe you're getting, a couple thousand a month for a rental. You know, that same property, if you go on Airbnb and do short-term rentals, you're going to rent for, I don't know, maybe, 300 a night or something like that. And so you can potentially earn a lot more, from a short-term rental income compared to the long-term rental income, renting by the night. So you go from renting by the month on a long-term lease to renting by the day or the night in Airbnb short-term rental. But film shoot rentals, you're actually renting by the hour. Okay. So the rates that you use are going to be hourly. And, every time you kind of compress that period, the rate and the profit goes up. So I'll just give you an example. So I'm in the Northeast. I happen to be in a higher cost part of the country. So this is going to, vary just like everything, depending on where you live. But, we rent our house for our base rate is $600 an hour. Okay. And so now we didn't start at that. When we started, we didn't know what to price it at. And so we actually priced at about half of that. And law of economics, we were inundated with inquiries, right? It was like immediate. People were sending, hey, are you free this date? I want to, for 2 hours or, 1 hour. We got a lot of what I would call questionable queries initially, right? When we had a lower rate, and you had people who only wanted to rent it for a very short period of time. So, my recommendation, if anyone's interested in this, and this is the approach that I teach, is you want to get professional crews in your home, and most shoots take, I would say, at least an hour to set up and load equipment in, and at least an hour to load out and kind of wrap up and clean up. So if you get people, asking to say, hey, I only need the house for 1 hour or 2 hours, I don't think that's realistic. I don't recommend that. I think the quality of the renter that you're going to get is not going to be as good. And you're not optimizing the profitability of shoots. So, what I recommend, we advertise a 6-hour minimum, okay, per day. So minimum 6 hours per day, but most shoots are 10 to 12 hours. So a typical professional shoot will be like a full day, 10 to 12 hour shoot. So, like I said, we start at 600 an hour. So, if you think about that, right? So I'm just kind of pulling out the calculator here. So 600 an hour at a 12-hour day, 7,200. That's kind of about the average, I would say. And that would be that's kind of our smallest shoot. And we haven't even talked about the potential tax benefits yet. And again, I have to say that I'm not a tax professional, get that out of the way, but, and I'm not giving tax advice, but your listeners may be familiar with the Augusta rule. And so for those maybe that aren't, that's a rule that basically says you can rent a property for up to 14 days a year. And the income on that is tax-free. There's some other considerations that you need to bear in mind, right? Of course, but the history of the Augusta rule, for those that are interested, it was the Masters golf tournament in Augusta, Georgia. Locals would rent their homes for people who were coming to see that, and they didn't want to have to pay. They didn't want to have to pay tax or kind of be viewed as a business, and so they lobbied Congress, and so they got this exemption. And for 14 days, for 2 weeks, you can rent your home essentially income tax free. And it became known as the Augusta rule, but it applies to everywhere in the country. Okay, Alex, I don't know. You look like you wanted to say something.
Cool.
So yeah,
at that
okay.
rate,
Okay.
that's 336 hours of renting out. That
Yeah.
I think that's where you're going with this, right?
Yeah. So where I'm going with this is, if you think 7,200 per day, and we actually try to limit our days to 14 days a year. So 7,200 at 14 days is about $100,000. And remember, that's tax free. So think about pre-tax equivalent, probably like $150,000, depending on your, your 33% tax
Hell
bracket,
yeah.
right? So
I'm pumped about
so
that.
obviously, so that's that was like the big aha moment for us. I mean, the first time we did a 1-day shoot and we made over $11,000 in 1 day. We were like, I was like looking at my I was looking at my single family rentals, and that's like, we didn't even make that in a year after like we had a big roof repair or something like that, right? From a cash flow perspective. And so, Yeah, I mean, so that's the potential. And by the way, for me personally, I like to limit the shoots to no more than 14 days a year. And we've kind of arrived at our pricing in part to sort of arrive at that and balance out to kind of come in at no more than 14 days. So obviously, if we lowered our price, we could get a lot more. We get a lot more shoots. And look, it's all up to the individual. So I have a family, and I've got a couple kids, and so I don't want to do film shoots every day. That's not doesn't fit with my lifestyle. But I can do a shoot a month. That's pretty easy, and my kids are in school during the day, and so a few hours after school, they're just hanging out in their rooms to say, okay, just hang out in your room or go to a friend's house or something. And so I think that's another myth. People say, oh, I've got kids. I can't do this. We totally do this with kids. And you don't have to offer up your entire house. I think that's another key point, right? Like people may think like, oh, my entire house is going to be taken over. Again, it really depends on the requirements of the shoot. So have we had big shoots that used up most of the space? Sure. But I would say most of the shoots really focus on a specific area. So in my house, it's typically either the kind of the kitchen, living, dining room area. It's sort of an open area. Or maybe it's the bedroom, or maybe it's the master bathroom. Again, all depending on what the requirements are. So I think kind of coming back to your question about a business, you want to make sure that you're not underpricing yourself, right? You want to think about your personal situation and think about, do I want to optimize for tax-free income, or do I really want to just go all out and get, as many shoots as I can? Okay. So that's totally possible. Usually, I have a template in my course that I teach, and you can kind of model out and see, okay, once I hit 14 days, the next shoot, the 15th shoot day, will trigger taxes on everything. So you're probably worse off if you just do 15 shoots. But then depending on your tax bracket, if you think you're going to get 18, 19, 20 shoot days, even though it's taxed, you're still gonna make out better. So the model changes a little bit depending on your tax bracket. But for me personally, I like to limit to 14 days. And so, from a business model, when we first started, we made about 50 grand in our first 6 months. Okay. And, again, I mean, that's without having to come up with a down payment. That's for, and it quickly dawned on us that most people are really underutilizing their home, right? For the most part, your home is, maybe the value goes up over time, but there's a lot of inefficiency is the way that I would look at it. I mean, you have this asset that you could be renting for commercial shoots, film shoots, photo shoots that most people just don't even know about. And I'll just add one more point on the business case. If you are a short-term rental investor, there's no reason why you can't also do this for your short-term rental, your vacation rental, your Airbnb. And it's actually serves as a nice complement as well, because if you think about it, most vacation rentals, you're really booked up on your long weekends, right? You're, Friday to Monday over the weekends. Most film shoots, because it's a business, most of them are happening during the week. So those traditionally slow days, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that you might not be getting a lot of guests in your Airbnb, you put that same property up for film shoots, and suddenly you're now, really increasing your income potential on that property. So
Very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you're blowing my mind right
So
now. I'm just visualizing how much wasted rental time I had in my house.
yeah, and again, I mean, look, I think people may be thinking, yeah, but like I'm intimidated to have like this big shoot. Like the beauty of this is it's really flexible, so you can define the size, the schedule, what rooms. So there are a lot of listing platforms out there, but the ones that I recommend allow you to define, what's the max number of people that I'm going to allow in my home, right? So maybe you do have a huge, not many of us have it, but maybe you do have a huge sprawling estate, and you're going to say, I can have 100 people here, right? But most of us have a normal house, and you might say, you know what? I'm going to limit my shoots to no more than 20 people, right? Kind of very, very manageable. That's kind of like having a small birthday party at your house, right? And the other thing that you want to do is you can also have tiered pricing. So you can kind of incentivize. So, I talked about a base rate. That base rate, that I use is for a very small shoot, which I define by 1 to 10 people. Okay. And the techniques that I recommend are as you go up in tier, so your second tier, say from 11 people to 20 people, I'd recommend, increasing your rate by $100. Okay. So maybe you're starting at 300 an hour for 1 to 10 people, raise it up to 400 for 11 to 20, and so on. If you're starting higher, it only goes up from there. So yeah.
Very exciting. Go ahead, Izzy.
So I would assume that among the people that know, this would be a very competitive market. So how do you kind of get yourself to stand out?
Yeah.
Also, what are these platforms? You've mentioned the platforms multiple
Yeah.
times now. Where
Yeah.
do you actually go to
Yeah.
get this stuff listed?
Yeah. So good question. So to answer your first question, not, it's interesting that you think it might be competitive, but it's really not that competitive in my experience because people just don't know about this, right? Like everyone has jumped into Airbnb. Like, I think the short-term rental space has become a bit saturated, right? Because everyone's kind of tried to get into it. But, the response that I always get to film shoots is people just don't even know it's really a thing. Okay. So it's not very competitive. So the bar is, I think, fairly low. And I think, Alex, you may have asked early on, or kind of earlier in our conversation here, you said, I want to talk about like, what do you have to invest to get started, right? Things like that. And so really the only investment that I recommend is professional photos. Now, look, if you're an amazing photographer, you've got a great camera, by all means, go for it, do it yourself. But professional photos are really the only thing that you need to, that I recommend that you invest in, right? So, yeah, that's kind of, I think, a key point, because particularly with, learning about any new real estate niche. I mean, I've kind of taken courses before where kind of get into a course, but then I had to like buy all this software. I had to like buy all this other stuff to make it work. But this is a case where you can really jump into it and, you already have your asset, and professional photos are really the only couple $100, right? For a good professional real estate photographer to shoot your home. And then, yeah, in terms of platforms, I mean, you can search for, kind of list my home for film shoots. There are a whole number of, platforms out there. There's one called Splacer, Gigster, right? Peerspace. Those are a few of the big ones. Each have their pros and cons, and I kind of get into it, in my course to sort of talk about why you might want to use some platforms over another. But yeah, definitely the platforms, they're newer, but professional photos will really, I think, set you apart, right? Because I'm always surprised at, kind of looking at the competition, so to speak, or other houses, and not everyone uses professional photos. But the other thing to remember is, again, every shoot has unique requirements. So normally when you're thinking about competition, if someone's staying in a house and there's this, if you're searching to go on vacation and stay in an Airbnb, that luxurious house with the pool and, all of the amenities, everyone's going to want that. But for film shoots, again, it really comes down to the requirements. So you remember that, that story about the utility monitoring company, they didn't need a fancy house, and they love the fact that my house was under construction so that they could, make a very realistic shoot to sell their water monitoring product, right? So
Very exciting.
Nice. Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
No,
I've been
go ahead,
asking
go
a
ahead.
lot. I was gonna say, you mentioned before that, similar with Airbnb and all these other short-term rental platforms, the ones that you mentioned for this type of real estate transactions also charge a fee. So were the numbers that you were giving earlier, is that what you would make after the fee or pre-fee?
Yeah, good question. So the different platforms have different fee structures. So some of the platforms charge everything to the guest. So they'll take a percentage of the guest, and the host doesn't pay anything. Most of the platforms have some sort of split model. So the host will pay a percentage and the guest will pay a percentage. I was quoting the full amount pre any revenue fee that comes out. But what I didn't also include is add-on fees. So, just like maybe an Airbnb, it's pretty standard to charge a cleaning fee, for example. That will, and crews are used to that. They have no issues. I've never had anyone kind of question, oh, why do you have a cleaning fee? And the other thing I'll mention too is those numbers that I quoted, that was a base rate, right? And so, yeah, we do have some small shoots that are less than 10 people, but I would say most of our shoots are at the higher tier, like in an 11 to 20 or a 20 to 30 person range, which bumps up our hourly rates. So, yeah.
And you were saying that the platform is also responsible for like any type of damages, insurance claims, and things of that nature.
That's right. Yeah. You're protected by using, the right platforms. They have their damage protection, and they also serve as a kind of arbitration if there are issues, right? One of the things that you want to do is you want to proactively screen your I call them tenants, your guests, in a way so that you can kind of prevent problems from happening in the first place, right? And that's why you want to get professional crews, and they do a great job in terms of, you want to make sure that they've got, put down floor protection, and they're very careful. But look, the worst problems that we've had is, we might have a case of like a piece of equipment that, rubbed against a wall and kind of like created some sort of scuff, right? That comes out really easily with like a, if you know what a magic eraser cleaning product is, right? That most things just come out that way. But again, if you go through and this is again why I always recommend going through the platforms, if there is a problem, you can just you sort of agree with the guest and say, okay, here's a damage, and we're going to agree on a damage charge, and you can kind of go through the platform, capture everything, and yeah, I mean, in all the years we've been doing this, we've never had any major damage issue. We've had, kind of little dings. The worst case was something that needed a little bit of a paint touch up, right? So
I have a dumb question.
Yeah, go for it.
When you first say film shoots, there might be stuff that you don't want happening in your house.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I know where this is going. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. So, yeah, no, let me take it away. So, when you, right.
It's so subtle, Alex.
Yeah. Right. So when you first list your home on one of these platforms, there's a pretty detailed surveying of what you will and what you won't allow, right? And so you can kind of keep everything very PG, so to speak, right? And even to the point of like, we don't want people smoking, we don't want people drinking, right? You can really and this is kind of comes back to this idea of flexibility. So it really runs the gamut of kind of what you're open to. And let me just say that, we do have many of those types of restrictions on our property, and it hasn't hurt our business. So please don't feel that you have to do anything that you're not comfortable with in order to be successful in this niche. So yeah, Aziz, go ahead.
So on the opposite side of the spectrum,
Yep.
Can you charge a premium for those other types of activities?
Well, that's a little bit outside of my realm of experience, but I will say that
Hypothetically,
everything is negotiable, right? Everything is negotiable. And that actually brings up a good point of, can you negotiate? So, the reason I recommend platforms is because pricing transparency, I think, is very important. You'll not waste your time, right? If you can very clearly state your rate, that immediately will screen out a lot of guests that you don't even want to work with because they don't have the budget, or there's going to be problems. But you can, we do sometimes we get an inquiry, even though our rate is clearly listed. And people say, look, anything we can do on price, we have this budget, et cetera. And so I think it's really up to you in terms of, I think about it in terms of the level of disruption. Okay. And so, if I have a shoot where, it's just going to be localized in my bedroom and master bathroom, I'm more willing to negotiate because it's very localized, it's less disruptive, the crew isn't taking over the house, etc. On the flip side, if I've got a shoot that is, multiple rooms, they're going to be everywhere. That's more disruptive. I'm going to be less likely to negotiate with them. So, on the flip side, though, if someone's asking for, something extra, and maybe, example is this. I'll give you an example. So we had a shoot where I think I mentioned this talent agency, sort of executive search company. And normally my home office is off limits. So I don't even post a picture of my home office because my home office and my older daughter's room are the two rooms in the house that we don't even show a picture of because those rooms are off limits for shoots. Um, but they came and they said because it was, relevant to what they were selling, they said, "Oh, we'd really like to be able to shoot in here." And even though that wasn't part of our listing. So that was kind of like an extra. And so, in this particular case, I said, fine, it wasn't too disruptive, but you know, that would be an example, I think, where you could potentially negotiate to say, look, or another example is shoot size, right? Like maybe you agree to a shoot size of a certain number of people, but then the production says, oh, the client wants to bring an extra 5 people. Well, that's, maybe that'll put you up into that next pricing tier. So you'd want to, charge appropriately for that as well. So yeah, there's transparent pricing, but like everything, you can negotiate.
Very cool. Well, Josh, I want to give you an opportunity. You mentioned it several times, but uh,
Yeah.
please tell us a little bit more about your course and how our audience could find it and take it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, look, I've shared, a few of the lessons that I've learned over the years of doing this, many kind of hard won lessons. And whenever I was talking to people about this, I got the same reaction that you guys have, like, oh, like I didn't even know this was a thing. I've been in real estate, but I've never even heard of renting for shoots. And so I wanted to create a course to really not just raise awareness, but enable people to very quickly get started and go from, not knowing how to get started to earning money from their home. And, look, I don't view film shoots as oh, I'm now only doing film shoots. I'm still interested in other areas of real estate. I think, film shoot rentals, it's an opportunity to very quickly or accelerate to some extent, the capital that you have that you can use for other investments or just, anything that you want, vacations, just to fill in the gap. So the course walks people through from, not knowing anything about film shoots, tells you how to get started, how to, create your listing, how you can market your shoot. I talk about profitable pricing strategies to make sure that you're optimizing and you're getting the right guests. I spend a lot of time on, communication strategies that result in finalized bookings, take people through, what they can expect on shoot day and, strategies for successful shoot days, and also talk about some of the less common scenarios, right? And how you can proactively avoid problems, talk about the regulatory areas that we touched on earlier in the call and other difficult situations. It was also kind of cool. I've included, some interviews with a top real estate tax professional, and just where we kind of dive deeper into sort of the tax benefits and the nuances of film shoot rentals. And I also have a film shoot producer that I've worked with in the past that I interview, where we talk about the perspective from the producer's perspective on how you can really kind of be successful as someone who's renting their home for shoots. So I think I've designed the course to be very transformational. And, with the idea that I want people to, take the course and very, very quickly be up and running, have their listings, and start earning money from their homes.
Very exciting. So where can we find it?
Yeah, so you can go to filmshootrentals.com, and that's where you can find all the information. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Do you
Awesome,
have any
awesome.
last words, any last message for our audience? I mean, this has been really exciting.
Yeah, no, I think just in the keeping with the theme here of film shoots, I think, if you're still thinking that your home isn't right for film shoots or you're not in the right, location of the country, I'd say just try it, right? I mean, everyone I think everyone should do this. It's a very low risk way to kind of get into a real estate niche with very little competition. Very, very passive, high income potential with, not a lot of work. And it can really accelerate, whatever goals you have in investments and real estate by, quickly building up that capital. So I encourage everyone to just give it a shot.
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much. This has been really great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.